What's up, guys? PLA Toy, what's up? Let's see. I'm just kind of playing around. I wanted to look at something here in a minute. What's happening, HPS? What's up, my man? My perps out there. Let me crank this down. I'm just getting set up, so let me see. What else am I doing here? I know I'm doing something. I ain't figured it out yet. So how you guys doing today? You guys hanging out, having fun? You guys partying or what? It's Friday. Let me mute that shit and I'll blow my damn eardrums out. So I have no idea how long I'm going to be on. This is just kind of another impromptu live stream. But I did want to look at something. The Democrats kind of dropped their plans today. Got another 4 hours to go. Shit. Oh, hell yeah, Toy. Left the range today. Man, I wanted to shoot a little bit today, but I ended up finishing up all my SDI work and then playing around doing some more studying, and now it's raining like all hell, so now I'm on here. So, but let's see. Where is it at? I'm probably going to have to freaking mute this real quick. So anyway, links up in the chat. As always, anybody's welcome to bounce in if you want. Let me get rid of some stuff here. Yeah, man. PLA, yeah, I've been doing SDI courses for last couple months. I'm in my second semester. Week 7 of my second semester. Next week will be my last week of the second semester, and then I bounce into the third. So, yeah, that's some of the videos you see me doing are the Park Horizon. If you've seen the Hydro Dip stuff, the field strip and function check stuff, a lot of that's just videos that I'm doing for my SDI classes that I'm just posting because I'm so jammed up doing other stuff some days. I don't have a whole lot of time to do anything else. So let me shrink this down. Now, today, let's see, there's 4 of us in here. So today, of course, the Democrats are going all up in arms about all the abortion stuff, which I'm not. The abortion stuff is what it is. However, Mr. Gerald Humpty Dumpty Nadler kind of dropped the game plan today. So he's going to talk for a second, and then he's going to tell you what the Democrats are planning on doing.
Enough. Many people, a disproportionate number from communities of color, do not have the option of traveling across state lines because they lack the resources to bear the costs of out-of-state travel, which include the related costs of childcare, lodging, or time off from work.
So yeah, just hang on, because he's going to get to something in a second that's relevant to all of us.
That is why it is essential that we also pass H.R. 8296, the Women's Health Protection Act of 2022, which would protect the right to abortion nation.
So I'm assuming everybody can hear this, right? You can hear old fat bastard, not this fat bastard, but that fat bastard talking.
Wide. The House has already passed this bill, but Senate Republicans have twice blocked its passage. This is unacceptable. We must do everything we can to ensure protection of abortion access in a post-Roe world. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on both H.R. 8297 and H.R. 8296. But this is not enough either. We face a radical Supreme Court deliberately packed.
Now, you guys pay attention to what this little fat bastard's about to say right here.
With extremists by a plot by the Federalist Society and Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump to pack the Supreme Court with extremists who have no regard for our liberties and who will destroy every liberty we have if we don't do something about it. And that is why Congressman Johnson and Congressman Jones and Senator Markey and I have introduced legislation.
The gentleman's time's expired.
To unpack the Supreme Court by increasing the number of justices by 4.
So everybody hear that? Oh, big boy right here and a couple other Congress people, House members, have submitted legislation to pack the Supreme Court. So they want to raise it by 4. So 9 justices now, they want to bring it up to 13. So a lot of the decisions that we have seen in the last little while about the Second Amendment, a lot of decisions that we have seen that have actually supported the Constitution when it came to firearms and our rights, if they pass this, all that stuff is in serious danger. So that's why I wanted to bring this up today. He said this was today. I was working in the shop. I was actually building the last couple tanks that I need to do bluing. So I need a bluing salts tank and another one. So I just put on their discussion today, or their debate, to listen to it, and that's what I caught. So yeah, all the fights that we've had, the New York Rifle and Pistol Club decision, Heller decision, all that stuff, if they actually pass this crap, is in serious danger. Yeah, you're right, PLA. Yeah. I mean, at the minute, and you look at any decision that's been made against these assholes that actually sides with the Constitution, they immediately want to throw a fit. They want to pack the court. They want to just throw the monopoly board out, take all the houses, throw them off the board, throw the bank, fucking cry, take the little red ball and go home. And this is more proof of that. So I haven't been able to find the text of this bill yet. I looked for it right after he said that. And I haven't found it yet. So I don't think it's been all the way submitted where you can read it yet. But that's the plan. And there's been other things that have gone on where House members and senators have talked about packing the Supreme Court. But I think this will be the first bill submitted in the House to actually go in that direction. So they raised the number of justices by 4. Guess who gets to put those judges on there, which is more than likely going to be Democrats, because they are going to slam them through. And then they'll just start picking away at all the actual constitutional decisions that have been made in the last little while. So fun, kids. This fight is very far from over. So, hell, there was, what's up, ADX? We're just talking, and hell, can I get back to where I can play this again real quick?
Who help others obtain the...
Madam Speaker.
To the young life that was...
These human lives. 6 weeks.
Who help others obtain an abortion. This includes the notorious Texas law SB 8, which permits any person...
Now, anybody who just bounced in, realize this is not about the abortion. This is about what he says at the end of this. Because he's talking about packing the court. Let me see whether I can get this. Fun on C-SPAN, guys.
House has already passed this bill, but Senate Republicans have twice blocked its passage. This is unacceptable. We must do everything we can to ensure protection of abortion access in a post-Roe world. I urge my colleagues to vote yes on both H.R. 8297 and H.R. 8296. But this is not enough either. We face a radical Supreme Court.
Yeah, Anthony, they're going to go to the ropes on this one, brother. When it comes to packing the court so that they can try to get their way, yeah, they're going to go to the ropes on this one.
Court, deliberately packed with extremists by a plot by the federal.
Now, deliberately packed with extremists. So to be an extremist, all you have to do is believe in the Constitution and the text of the Constitution, and you're an extremist. So welcome to the club, kids. Y'all are all extremists.
Society and Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump to pack the Supreme Court with extremists who have no regard for our liberties and who will destroy every liberty we have if we don't do something about it. And that is why Congressman Johnson and Congressman Jones and Senator Markey and I have introduced legislation.
The gentleman's time's expired.
To unpack the Supreme Court by increasing the number of justices by 4.
So he wants to unpack the Supreme Court by packing the Supreme Court. Only in the world of the leftists does that actually make sense. Only in the world of a leftist. Yeah, dude, I absolutely detest these people too. There is no limit to my disdain for people like that little Humpty Dumpty looking motherfucker right there. And see, the issue we've got right now is we're running up on midterms, and we'll see how things go in the midterms. If midterms turn out like 2020, then I don't know how we get around what these Democrats are going to do besides actually just physical fighting it. So we'll see. Maybe a bunch of election stuff gets fixed, and in 2022, this year, we actually have a straight up heads up election, and people actually get their votes counted. So we'll see. Yeah, ADX, these guys have no regard for the Constitution whatsoever. None. If it limits their power, they have nothing but hatred for it. And they have nothing but hatred for our Constitution because guess what? It limits their power. So it's wild what we're running up against, and just me catching this today just kind of threw things, which I figured this was coming. And I think I might have said something about it on another video or two that Democrats would actually try this. And they've been talking about it. The guy, he's a member of the House now who used to be on, oh shit, what's the show with Will Smith? The Fresh Prince. I think he was on that show. He flat out said it not too long back that they would pack the Supreme Court. In the Senate, of course, they've talked about just doing away with the filibuster. And they've talked about actually adding justices to the Supreme Court. But this, as far as I know, is going to be the first legislation that's actually introduced to pack the Supreme Court. So they want to raise, and as soon as I find the legislation, as soon as they post the text of the legislation, I'll do a video on that. But yeah, they want to raise the number of justices on the Supreme Court by 4. And they of course will get to pick those justices because they'll ram them through, and Republicans are a bunch of spineless wonders. And yeah, it could come back to bite them, PLA. Yeah, it could. The problem with that is how much damage will they do in the meantime? How much damage will they be able to do to our rights before we get to turn that around on them? And then what happens next time? They get to turn it right around back on us. And then it just bounces and it's just this damn cycle, which it is a lot of times now. But this could turn that cycle into a major battle. Think about it. They add 4 justices to the Supreme Court in the line of Ketanji Brown, who they just added to the Supreme Court. They would push an assault weapons ban through within minutes of gaining an actual majority on the Supreme Court. Yeah, they brought up this 10-year-old girl so many times today. It was just 10-year-old girl, 10-year-old girl, 10-year-old girl. They never mention the whys. They never mention the hows. They never mention the whos. They just want to use this girl as their poster child for everybody should be able to have an abortion at any time for any given reason. I've said it before, and I will say it again, and I will continue to say it. Every one of the Democrats' policies is all about release from responsibility. So abortion, release from responsibility for your actions. Gun control, release from responsibility release from being responsible for your own safety, your own protection. The government's going to be there to do it. Everything for them is a government program to basically take care of people, as they would put it. And it's really just to make people more dependent on government so that people rely more on government. So government becomes their God. And you fucking cat. Get your claws out of my leg. Go. Little shit. Oh, I know what I'll stick on, because there's another bill that I'm working on covering now. If you guys have paid attention in the last probably year, 2 years, one of the Democrats' main focus on everything is on hate crimes, on white supremacy. So what they're using that for is to push through even more gun control, which we all know at this point is all unconstitutional, but they want to push through more gun control to make more people prohibited possessors, and to really go on a serious big brother spying on the public deal, to where if you had anything on your social media that they would consider being hate speech or anything like that, then they basically have the right to spy on you. That's in another bill that I covered not too long back. So this is this Disarm Hate Act over here. And again, it's just ways to make more people prohibited possessors. You get in a fight with someone who's a different color than you, all of a sudden you get charged with a hate crime, and guess what? You lose all of your rights. Just another one of their little scheming ass damn plans. And let me see whether I can pull something up. I can't remember where in the hell I put it. Let's see. I can't remember whether we went through that one or not. We might as well call this one a damn share the pain stream, but yeah, man, it's we know the way this is going with almost anything. Someone can instigate an argument with you. Someone can start some shit, and they're immediately going to claim that it was motivated by race when you react to what they did. And then all of a sudden, all your rights are going away. All right, just in case you guys haven't seen this.
Commander Brown, Detroit Urban Survival Training. Coop, John Crump tells me you're starting a new business. And this is what's important to remember. You're going to be successful. Nothing can stop you. Remember, conceive, believe.
Yeah, I got my own dust promo, baby.
Achieve. What you conceive affects what you believe, which affects what you achieve. So simply believe, no matter what, that you're going to succeed, and you will. So that's what you're going to think about every day, how you're going to get it done, and nothing can stop you. And that's an intelligent option, which will increase your survivability and your success in life.
Anybody else other than me think this guy read like one too many motivational books?
In cold blood, wounding 3
Okay,
others.
yeah, this was
I
part
want to
of
read
it.
into the hearing record names we should not forget of the victims.
So this was a hearing done right after the Buffalo shooting, where they started pushing a bunch of this white supremacy, white hate bullshit again. You know, right wing. Oh, you hate everybody. Guns bad. Same old lines Democrats always use.
Roberta
Give me a sec. I'll be back.
Drury, Margus G. Morrison, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter, Geraldine Talley, Celestine Cheney, Hayward Patterson, Catherine Massey, Pearl Young, and Ruth Whitfield. Behind each of those names is a story. A loving grandmother of 6, a sister caring for her sick brother, a father who at the time of the shooting was buying snacks for a movie night with his family. Every one of these victims left behind loved ones who are grieving that loss, and several of those loved ones are in the room with us today. I thank them for being here. There are no words that fill the empty chairs at your dinner table or the empty spaces in your heart. But your willingness to sit in this room, to honor the memory of those you lost, is a lesson in courage and love. Please know that you are not alone. America joins you in grief. We offer our deepest condolences and, most importantly, our commitment to do something. When gunmen are slaughtering babies, grandparents, and other innocent children, Americans in grocery stores, schools, neighborhoods, and houses of worship, we have a responsibility to do something. Nearly 9 in 10 Americans agree we need sensible gun law reform in this country.
I want to know the 9 out of 10 Americans this jackass is talking to, because they just invent these numbers. They just pull them straight out of their asses.
And we need it now. We often hear the question asked, why do mass shooters engage in such horrific acts? Well, one of their motivations is
Oop, wrong button.
domestic terrorism, a threat that is, in the words of the FBI Director Christopher Wray, metastasizing across the country. I was just handed a press release as I came into the room.
Yeah, HBS, I should have something more than likely the beginning of next week drawn up for you. This week I got caught up. I had to build the park rising tanks and the bluing tanks and a bunch of other shit I had to take care of this week. But yeah, the designs you sent me, yeah, those are easy to work with. And what I'll do is I'll put together just I'll take a couple of those designs and put them together with the HBS armory on it. And whichever one you like, we'll roll with.
That there was a federal indictment handed down today against 5 members of the Proud Boys, white supremacist group, including Enrique Terrio, its former leader, charging them with seditious conspiracy for their roles in the January 6th assault. For those who believe that what the subject matter of this hearing is a contrivance and doesn't reflect reality, these indictments indicate that we are talking about real-life crime and real-life terrorism.
Never mind the fact that you can indict anybody for anything at any time, especially when you control the Justice Department.
Violent extremism, however, just doesn't appear out of thin air. I'd like to turn to a video on the role of the media and the role that they played in dragging hateful rhetoric into mainstream America, and sadly, how it's inspiring acts of racist violence.
Now, notice before we even look at this, they don't mention the fact that people like the Pulse nightclub shooter were Muslim and just hated Americans in general. Never mind the Black Hebrew Israelites that went into a deli in New York and were killing people because they were Jewish. Many times there are things that are done out of hatred that are done by other races, and these assholes ain't about to talk about that shit.
Is being stolen from American citizens.
Want to replace you, the American voters, with newly amnestied citizens.
More obedient voters from the third world.
Their plot to remake America is to bring in the illegals.
It makes our own country poorer and dirtier. Our civilization is superior to the culture that these immigrants are bringing.
This is a flat-out invasion.
It's a war. Undefended, it collapses.
We're just going to consign tens of thousands, perhaps millions of Americans to their deaths.
We have every right to fight to preserve our nation and our heritage and our culture. Every right to fight to preserve our nation and our heritage and our culture.
One people, one nation, and immigration. One people, one nation.
An 18-year-old white supremacist opened fire on a supermarket. The Great Replacement theory motivated this 18-year-old white supremacist.
Oh, yeah, 80. Yeah, they make these questions so vague a lot of times. It's like, are you in favor of gun safety? Well, all of us are in favor of gun safety. None of us want to see some jackass running around being unsafe with a gun. None of us want to see some jackass going out and murdering innocent people. They never explain what they mean by their version of gun safety. Like, we're going to have the police be able to walk into your home and fine you for every gun that's not locked up, unloaded, it's separate from ammunition. Our version of gun safety is we're going to take away anything we deem as an assault rifle. They never make these questions to where someone can give a real educated, honest answer to it.
Andre was my nephew. He just came here. He was on a birthday party.
And look, Al Sharpton's fucking bobble-headed ass standing up there just drives me insane.
And he left behind 5 kids.
She was that light that shone through whatever darkness might have been present.
They enjoyed our life together. I love her.
She loves cooking.
Yeah, PLA, yeah, we can't fix the amount of ignorant ass, stupid motherfuckers that are out there right now that actually buy into this shit. Yeah, I didn't see these people doing all these, montages of the families that were, had their loved ones taken by Black Hebrew Israelites. Or I didn't see them doing montages whenever people were killed by Muslim extremists.
And sharing food with us.
When all hell broke loose at Tops, Aaron Salter, the policeman, stepped into his assignment.
A woman who survived 3 aneurysms and breast cancer.
Catherine Massey calling for federal action against growing gun violence that ended up taking her life.
Took away my mother and my best friend. This needs to be fixed.
One day I'll be up there with her, one day in heaven.
Yeah, well, Al Sharpton running around talking about Hymietown and the fake rape and then all the shit that went on and then burning businesses down. Yeah, that's the dude you really wanted to solve racism in America.
I first held a hearing on domestic terrorism in the year 2012, 10 years ago, after a white supremacist murdered 7 Sikh worshipers in Oak Creek, Wisconsin. Sadly, 10 years later, this threat has only grown worse. In the decades since Oak Creek, violent white supremacists have killed innocent Americans in a series of sickening attacks. They include mass shootings at the Emmanuel AME Church in South Carolina in 2015, Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue in 2018, and Walmart in El Paso, Texas in 2019. While each of these attacks was committed by a lone gunman, they're part of a larger pattern. Don't take my word for it.
Yeah, that larger pattern is called mental fucking illness, you jackass.
During the prior administration, the FBI and Department of Homeland Security found that, and I quote, white supremacist extremism poses a persistent threat of lethal violence, and that since 2000, white supremacists, quote, were responsible for more homicides than any other domestic extremist group. That was a finding by our government.
Because we know our government is so trustworthy.
White supremacists were responsible for more homicides than any other domestic extremist movement. White supremacist violence has swept across America, and this trend raises the obvious question: why is it getting worse?
This is what happens when you have a complete leftist media that supports a completely statist leftist side of our government. They completely twist everything, and people eat this shit up.
We cannot deny that hate has a big platform. As we all saw in the video, there are media figures like Tucker Carlson dragging racist conspiracy theories into mainstream America. More than 400 episodes of Tucker Carlson's show have amplified the so-called Great Replacement conspiracy theory, guiding principle of modern white supremacist movement. As lawmakers, we must speak at one voice.
Oh yeah, they don't want to talk about actual numbers, PLA. Why would they do that? That would disprove all of their arguments. It's kind of like them wanting to ban so-called assault rifles when handguns kill way more people than assault rifles. Hell, hands and feet kill more people than assault rifles. They don't want to talk about numbers. They don't want to talk about actual facts. They want to push the narrative. And they have a whole media complex behind them that sits there and pushes this bullshit forward.
And repudiating this incendiary rhetoric, along with any individual or extremist group that resorts to violence. And while there are no simple solutions for addressing violent extremism, a promising start is the Domestic Terrorist Prevention Act, which I first introduced in 2017. I'm sorry to say that the Senate was unable to move this forward when I offered it 2 weeks ago. But my hope is that this hearing will mark a shift in our willingness to work together in combating domestic terrorism. That is our obligation as lawmakers. And that is our responsibility to the families like those in this room who've lost a loved one to unspeakable acts of hate. With that.
What'd you send me, ADX? I didn't see it. Oh, yeah. Fucking most of the shit they talk about is all a damn Democrat thing. These people are so full of shit, it's not even funny. I don't see where you sent it, ADX. Did you send me a clip? And if so, where did you send it? Or hell, let's see. Let me do something. If I can figure out what I'm doing, I'll be all right one of these days. Here, if you got a clip, post it in chat, and I should be able to bring it up. I just made you a mod. Since you weren't a mod before, it's probably why I can't see it. Yeah, post it again, brother. That way I'll pull it up. Let me see. Might have to swap back over here. What the hell? Yeah, here we go. Let me see. All right, let me do this. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit and go over here. You guys tell me whether you can see this. You guys should be seeing my screen.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America, from then and on, will be
Hold on.
European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength. And so we have been, we haven't always gotten.
How am I going to do this? Let's see, because StreamYard can be a bit of a pain. All right. Can you now can you guys see Biden on the right? Since I'm sharing the whole screen.
I don't want to suggest we have all the answers. I would argue it's unlike any other large country in the world. So there's a second thing in that black box, an unrelenting stream of immigration, non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent.
Now, just to pause it right there, doesn't he seem a little bit more coherent then than he does now?
For the first time in 2017, we'll be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. Absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America, from then and on, will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength. And so we have been, we haven't always gotten it right. I don't want to suggest we have all the answers.
Yeah. More than likely it was probably about 4 strokes ago, Heath. But yeah, there's our little buddy. He's all about the replacement theory.
I turn to the ranking member, Grassley, Senator Grassley, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is our 3rd hearing in this Congress on this threat of domestic terrorism. March of last year, Director Wray of the FBI testified before us that the threat of domestic terrorism is really growing. 6 months later, he testified to another committee that the FBI had 2,700 active domestic terrorism investigations compared to the usual 1,000. Some of those 600 cases involved the Capitol riot on January the 6th.
I'm about to burn myself up.
Another is a tragic event that the chairman just referred to, the terrible attack by young white racists, killing 10 in Buffalo. One of those killed in that domestic act of terrorism was Ruth Whitfield. Her son, Garnell, is with us here today. Nearly 600 events were anti-police riots that erupted in dozens of cities in 2020. FBI Executive Assistant Director Jill Sanborn testified before us in January that 800 domestic terrorism investigations were opened as a result of the 2020 riots. That was 5 months ago. Each time we speak with the FBI, the number has usually risen by a few hundred. However, due to the lack of federal jurisdiction, this is only a small fraction of the 14,000 that were arrested just in the first few weeks. Tens of thousands appear to have participated in mass violence. I was truly surprised by the sheer number of Americans that have been willing to engage in violence in support of anti-police rhetoric. 2,000 police officers were injured, 25 people were killed, and there was $2 billion in property damage.
Yeah, man, that's Dan Bongino says it perfect when he talks about that, and I've heard some other guys say it. But I'm really getting to the point where, especially after listening to these Democrats, they've just proven themselves to be absolutely vile people, absolutely vile human beings. So when they start running their mouths about stuff, you automatically look at their motives, and their motives are always big government and more control and less individual freedom. So, you know, they trying to think. Yeah, I used to be a little bit more lenient when I talked about some people who were on the left. What's up, G23? Used to be a little bit more lenient when I thought about people on the left, that maybe these were just people who were, you know, just saw things differently than me. Well, yeah, they do see things differently than me. They see things as the government is always the answer, and I see things as the individual is always the answer. Every piece of legislation these Democrats vote for is backed up at the point of a gun. So any of their gun control proposals, whether it's this Save Our Kids shit that they just passed, realize that when they vote for that stuff, they're voting for police and government to come to your home, point guns at you and your family. And if it's anything like what they've done in the past, probably kill you, kill your family, burn your house to the damn ground. So when it comes to looking at Democrats and their ideas these days, no, they're just vile fucking people. There's no way around it. They're absolutely vile fucking people, and I have no use for them anymore. These are people that can't look at an ultrasound of a baby in a womb and actually admit that that is a living human being in that womb. These are people that believe just because you own certain objects that the government should be able to come throw you in jail, even though you're not a danger to anybody. And let's be honest, if I had 14 machine guns behind me right now, I'm not a danger to anybody. If I just walked out and I shot my machine guns, I never hurt another living soul, where's the crime in that? There is none. But Democrats think that the ATF or the police should be able to come to my home if I own something like that, pull guns on me, possibly cause an armed conflict with me, shoot all into my house and into people in my home, and they think that's perfectly fine because it's the government using the force. And ultimately, like a lot of people have said, Democrats want the government to have a monopoly on force, a monopoly on violence.
The arson as the preferred tactic. For anyone who thinks violence from political left ended in 2020, it didn't. In May of 2022, report by the Center of Strategic and International Studies found that 40% of all.
Yeah, dude, Tulsi Gabbard seems to be kind of sensible on stuff. Joe Manchin seems to be kind of sensible on some things. But the vast majority, no, they're not sensible on shit. It's very much a clash of ideals. And I've talked about it before. I believe that as long as what I'm doing is not wrongfully depriving someone else of life, liberty, or property, then the government should stay out of my business. And don't forget, the whole reason that, like this stream tonight, when I started it, the whole stream started off with old Jerry Nadler talking about introducing legislation to pack the Supreme Court, which could ultimately overturn every single constitutional decision that we have seen come through in the past few months, and even the past decade or so. So make no doubt, or have no doubt, if the Democrats did succeed in packing the Supreme Court, anything from Heller on to the New York Rifle and Pistol Club, all that shit's gone. Those are going to be the first things that they are going to go after. That, and of course, their abortion shit.
Domestic terrorist attacks in 2021 were from the left. By anyone who thinks that the violence from the far left didn't begin in 2020, it didn't. In 2016, 2 black racists killed 8 police officers in Dallas and Baton Rouge in 11 days, according to a May 2021 report from the FBI. Black, racially motivated.
Yeah, G23, the Second Amendment's going to be one of the first things Democrats will go after.
In 2017. Even though many in the press only focus on far-right attacks, the most deadly ideology often changes year to year. So, in 2018 and 2019, that was white, racially motivated and violent extremism. But in 2020, anti-government extremism was the most lethal ideology. One constant of domestic terrorism is that the threat is always shifting, and violence comes from all sides of the political spectrum. An Asian man drove a car into a peaceful protest in favor of fair treatment of African Americans. The Waukesha parade murderer and the New York subway shooter had delivered long racist tirades against white Americans before their crimes. I've said it before, and so say it again. We all have to condemn all political violence. We have the time and the resources to combat violence committed under the banner of every deadly ideology. We do not have to choose. We must combat.
And see, that's the thing. If we're looking at domestic terrorism, why? Well, I know why the Democrats only want to focus on one end of it. One is because the vast majority of gun owners are white Americans. Now, black Americans and other minorities are quickly catching up with us, and fucking more power to them, man. Bring it on. Because everybody has the right to own arms for self-defense. Every single buddy. Tony Simon with the Second is for Everybody. Fucking dude rocks. And Monterey, I may not agree with him on some things as far as some views that he has, but hey, dude's doing some hell of some work, getting more and more people involved in it. Those guys are outstanding. But when they're using this and they're going through this whole white supremacy, white extremist deal, understand this comes down to spying on people. So that also ties in with some of the red flags law shit that they got going on right now. If the government can spy on your social media accounts, well, you say something like what I would say on an average stream sometimes, which isn't racist. It isn't violent. It's just saying that there are certain things that could cause people to be violent, like government encroachment on people's rights. Well, that would make me an extremist, me simply believing in our constitutional rights and the limiting powers of government. That makes me an extremist. So these bills are coming down to that. They're actually pushing more and more domestic spying. It's all about power. It's all about control. It's got jack shit to do with keeping people safe.
All. At the same time, we have to protect speech. A fanatical Bernard Sanders.
Yeah, I don't think I may have heard about Chris Chang, as a matter of fact. Trying to think. Yeah, I may have. Didn't he testify in front of Congress? And he may have, hell, it may be during this damn hearing. I think it was during another one Chris testified in front of Congress on some stuff. And then you got people like Yehuda Reamer, who is definitely a big proponent of firearms ownership and self-defense, speaks a lot to the Jewish, which he speaks a lot to everybody, but he speaks a lot to the Jewish community, trying to get more and more of the Jewish community to get on board with actually being responsible for their own safety. There's a lot of shit that went on in New York, probably about a year or so ago, where you had the Black Hebrew Israelites that were involved in a couple killings with Jewish people. And there were some other attacks on Jewish communities up there. And there were a couple of synagogues. There were a couple of synagogues who actually, their people got armed up and were ready to defend their synagogue and their people, which was out freaking standing to see. And I wish more would go that way. We live in a very upside down world these days.
Supporter tried to murder Republicans in a congressional baseball game in 2017. I guess that was in a practice session of that, getting ready for that game. Agreeing with Bernie Sanders politically is protected by the First Amendment. And
see, this jackass who did the shooting in Buffalo was an absolute leftist. And they don't want to talk about that shit. The guy who shot at the ball field and shot Steve Scalise, matter of fact, he almost ended up killing Steve Scalise. He was an absolute leftist. This guy in fucking Buffalo, according to his own little posts and shit like that, he was an absolute leftist. This last freaking whatever troglodyte motherfucker that shot up this thing, I think on the 4th of July, he was an absolute leftist.
Trying to kill others in support of that belief is not. I don't think any Republicans tried to argue that being a Bernie Sanders supporter made a person a domestic terrorist just because one person who agreed with him was. We have to avoid feckless name calling.
Man, they what's up, one? Dude, they kill me with these prepared statements that their staffers write. None of these guys could sit around and actually have a conversation like what we have, even just in the chat, where you're responding, realistically on something. They just sitting there reading these statements. Yeah, Mike, I wish they'd take their ball and go straight to fucking hell with it, but that's just me. But if you guys that had just come in, we started this stream with Jerry Nadler talking about a bill him and a couple of other House members are submitting to actually add 4 more seats to the Supreme Court. That bill, as soon as they get the text submitted, I'll do a video on the text, but they are ramping up to go ahead and see about adding seats to the Supreme Court right now.
Because we disagree over major issues. It is unfair, for example, to equate Republican concerns over illegal immigration with racist extremism. And of course, that's profoundly sad. If we're going to come together to solve the problems of domestic terrorism, we have to do so with an eye to solving the problems that truly exist. Reorganizing offices in the Department of Justice that have asked not to be reorganized doesn't do that. Foisting reporting and focusing requirements on them.
Now, here's something he's talking about, the reorganization there. And I've got to look into it. I haven't been able to find it, but right after January 6th, the DC Capitol Police were supposed to expand and have offices in Atlanta and in Florida. Why the DC police needed to expand their offices outside of DC, well, that's the only reason that could possibly be is so Democrats can have their own little special police. But I haven't heard anything about it in the past little while, and I've got to look into that again. But yeah, Mike, they've been talking about it. They've been threatening it for a while. Chuck Schumer, Dick Durbin, again, the guy who used to be on the Fresh Prince, who's now a member of the House. All these guys have talked about this, talked about doing away with the filibuster and packing the Supreme Court. And now they're actually putting through the legislation to go ahead and pack the Supreme Court. The filibuster, I expected them to go ahead and try to do away with the filibuster long before now. With the decisions coming down from the Supreme Court that are actually constitutional decisions, I definitely expected them to go ahead and try to push it already. So we'll see where this goes, because they're going to have to do something before the 2022 elections, the midterms in November. And we'll see how the November midterms go. If they go like the elections went in 2020, then, man, I don't know. It's going to get rough, to say the least. If we are able to get some people who actually believe in the Constitution, if we're actually able to get them into the House and into the Senate in 2022, then we'll probably be looking pretty good. What's up, Fudd? Hey, Fudd, in case you didn't know, the Democrats are apparently submitting bills now to go ahead and pack the Supreme Court. So hold on to your tactical Fudd butt.
That are intended to push them to combat one deadly ideology more than the other.
Now, this hearing has nothing to do with that. This is a hearing that they did right after the Buffalo shootings on white supremacy. This ties into another bill that I'm going to cover in the next little bit. So, yeah, One Love. That's been the plan for a lot of this for a long time now, is to flood the market. Here I go with my replacement theory, but basically to flood the voting pool with illegals that are going to vote for Democrats. Say what you want, but if you're not an American citizen, you should not be able to vote in American elections. That's, I can't go vote in another country's elections. Hell, I can't go vote in another state's elections. So someone coming over here illegally shouldn't be able to vote in American elections.
Others, won't help anyone. We have to listen to what is truly needed. Those operating in the terrorism space have asked for a slew of authorities to help them combat international terrorism. I introduced an amendment to the NDAA last year to give them these authorities. It didn't pass at that time. I hope it will this year when I again offer it. Finally, we have to come together to protect our law enforcement officers.
You got to give it to Democrats in a way. Democrats are really good at basically flooding the court with a bunch of different advances from a bunch of different directions that ultimately all serve their goals of disarming the people and stripping us of our rights. Republicans, not so much. Republicans are fucking speed bumps, man. They may slow the Democrats down every once in a while, but ultimately they bend over and, Democrats get their way. But Manchin, I think Manchin's a pretty good dude. I think Manchin is someone who's actually does believe in the Constitution. I don't know how long Manchin will be able to stand up to the amount of pressure that he will get from Democrats. And I heard a little while back, and I'm not 100% sure that Manchin was just going to change parties. But even if Manchin changes parties, he still leans way left. What's up, lunatic? Oh, man. I got to get... Oh, there's so much equipment I got to get. I was looking at Mills the other day. I got to get I'm probably going to end up having to get a small business loan in the next little while, which is already suck.
Found that law enforcement officers have increasingly become targets of domestic terrorists from all sides of the political spectrum. The report states that government, military, and especially law enforcement were the primary targets of domestic terrorist attacks and plots in 2021, composing 43% of all attacks. Law enforcement officers were the targets in 48% of the violent far left events, 37% of the violence far right events.
That's it. And that's another thing that kills me with some of this. Yeah, lunatic. I don't want. Well, I'd love to have a big CNC mill, but I basically want a mill that's got the display on it to where once I zero it out, I've got that display telling me where everything's at. So if I've got to move over 1,000ths, I'm not having to sit there and measure a bunch of stuff. I'm not having to just sit there and read the hand wheels. I can look at it right there on the die or right there on the display, and it's just easier to keep track of things that way. But I was looking at a Grizzly. Actually, there's a Grizzly mill lathe setup that if I can get it with a 4-jaw chuck, it'll be perfect. I can cut down barrels with it. I can thread barrels with it. I could do RMR cuts with it. All the basic operations, and it's got a long enough bed to where I can do those things. I've got a small lathe here that I'm learning a little bit on, but I've got a long way to go as far as that. But as far as mill operations, I'm decent on a mill operation. Given the measurements and tooling, I could probably cut an RMR right now, depending. But I'm trying to tool up with that, trying to get prices on a lot more plasma equipment. And hell, I was looking at prices on fiber lasers the other day. Whew, damn. 3,500 probably just base to start out with a fiber laser. Yeah, that's going to hurt. Bacon, just go ahead and wake your ass up. Get you a shot of coffee. Get you a shot of liquor in it. You'll wake up. It'll be all right. Either that'll get you some fine ass chick to go in and rub you on your head a little bit. You'll be good.
And all jihadist events in 2021. I understand that from time to time, while our police and our military are often the victims of extremists in violence, they in turn are accused of being the hotbed of extremism. In May of this year, we received an FBI report that stated, quote, available FBI reporting did not reveal RMVE, which is a racist extremist, infiltration into law enforcement, end of quote. We've been briefed by the FBI that extremism is no more common in the military than the general population and is not limited to white racism, but includes black racism, Antifa ideology appearing within the ranks. If we're going to be serious about combating extremism, we need to be realistic that the threat is often from outside law enforcement and the military and directed against them, not the other way around. In fact, these baseless accusations of widespread extremism in law enforcement and the military probably only strengthen the likelihood that innocent officers and service members will unfairly become targets for violent attacks. In 2018, members of Antifa in Philadelphia assaulted 2 Marines, believing them to be white supremacists. They weren't, they were Hispanic. It's important that those of us in positions to lead be clear that all violence will never be tolerated. I look forward to working together to do that. I yield.
Let me be clear. I agree with you, Senator Grassley. Violence is unacceptable in this constitutional democracy.
We're not a constitutional democracy. Anybody who says that needs to be punched in the face repeatedly until they get the fact that we're supposed to be a republic.
Today we welcome 5 witnesses. I will introduce the majority witnesses, then I'll turn to Ranking Member Grassley to introduce the minority witnesses. Mr. Garnell Whitfield Jr. is the former fire commissioner in Buffalo. He tragically lost his mother, Ruth Whitfield, in the Buffalo attack last month. Mr. Whitfield, I know it's not easy for you to be here today in the midst of your loss and grief, but we really appreciate you coming forward so that you can speak for many of the families and friends who had such a terrible time in dealing with this loss. We're also joined by Professor Robert Pape of the University of Chicago. In addition to serving as professor of political science, he's the director of the Chicago Project on Security and Threats. I first learned of your work on one of your television presentations. I'm glad you can be here today to make a presentation. Our final majority witness is Mr. Michael German. Mr. German is a former FBI special agent currently serving as a fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice, Liberty, and National Security. Ranking Member Grassley, would you like to introduce your witness?
Yes, thank you for that privilege. Justin Herdman is a partner in the Cleveland office law firm Jones Day, served as U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, 2017 to 21. He was jointly recommended to that position with bipartisan support from our colleagues Brown and Portman. As U.S. Attorney, Mr. Herdman was widely recognized for his success in fighting terrorism and violent crime. He was also vice chair of the Attorney General's Advisory Committee. While a career prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office, he prosecuted the case of anarchist bridge bombers. Mr. Herdman also currently serves as judge advocate in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. We thank him for his service.
Now, you guys know old Steve Dettelbach got confirmed the other day by the Senate. And I keep looking for clips, trying to find his confirmation, and I can't find anything anywhere. I'm going to have to go through the complete day the other day to try, or the complete Senate video from the other day to see whether I can find the clip of him actually being confirmed. These people kept his confirmation so freaking quiet. It was just unreal. It's like it never fucking happened.
And for testifying today. Jonathan Turley is Shapiro Professor of Public Interest Law, George Washington University Law School. He is nationally recognized legal scholar who has written extensively in areas ranging from constitutional law to legal theory to tort law. Professor Turley is a specialist in questions of separation of powers and the First Amendment, amongst many other things. He has represented numerous high-profile clients in cases raising these areas of law. We also see his thoughtful commentary on cable TV several times a week. Thank you for testifying today.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Let me lay out the mechanics of today's hearing. After I swear in the witnesses, each will have 5 minutes to make an opening statement. Then we'll have rounds of questioning. Each senator will have 5 minutes each. And I ask everyone to try to respect the time limits. Now I'm going to ask, as the tradition of the Senate Judiciary Committee, for the witnesses to stand to be sworn. If you'd raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before this committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you very much. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. Mr. Whitfield, I'm going to ask you to make the initial opening statement, and then we'll go down the table in order.
Thank you, sir. To the members of this honorable body, on behalf of all of the victims who were murdered or injured on May 14th and their families, we sincerely thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. And though I will be sharing with you some of my family's memories about my mother and the devastation her murder has wrought upon our family, the truth is that I'm speaking on behalf of all of the victims and their families. Mrs. Ruth Whitfield was my mother. She was literally and figuratively the heartbeat of our family, and my father's soulmate for 68 years. She was the person who held us together, probably just like your mothers did for your families. What I loved most about her was the way she loved her family unconditionally, sacrificing everything for us. She visited my father at the nursing home where he's lived for the past 8 years almost every day, including on the day she was murdered, to ensure that he got the care that he needed from the nursing home and to supplement that care with their own personal and loving touch. Our lives are forever changed, forever damaged by an act of profound hate and evil, and nothing will ever take away the hurt, the pain, or the hole in our hearts. For her to be murdered, taken away from us by someone so full of hate, is impossible to understand and even harder to live with. But we're more than hurt. We're angry. We're mad as hell because this should have never happened. We're good citizens, good people. We believe in God. We trust in God. But this wasn't an act of God. This was an act of a person. And he did not act alone. He was radicalized by white supremacists. His anger and hatred were metastasized like a cancer by people with big microphones in high places.
Now they're going to talk about like Fox News and shit on here, and there is zero evidence this guy was following Fox News. What's up, Too Many Choices? There's every evidence that this guy was an absolute leftist. But hey, this cat's reading another speech that was written for him by a Democrat staffer. I will bet money on it.
Screaming that black people were going to take away their jobs and opportunities. Every enforcement agency charged with protecting the homeland has conducted risk and threat analysis and determined that white supremacy is the #1 threat to the homeland. And yet, nothing has been done to mitigate it or eradicate it. We're people of decency. We're taught to love even our enemies. But our enemies don't love us. So what are we supposed to do with all our anger and all of our pain? Do you expect us to continue to just forgive and forget over and over again? And what are you doing? You're elected to protect us, to protect our way of life. I ask every one of you to imagine the faces of your mothers as you look at mine, and ask yourself, is there nothing that we can do? Is there nothing that you personally are willing to do to stop the cancer of white supremacy and the domestic terrorism it inspires? Because if there is nothing, then, respectfully, senators, you should yield your positions of authority and influence to others that are willing to lead on this issue. The urgency of the moment demands no less. My mother's life mattered. My mother's life mattered. And your actions here today.
Now understand, man, I can't take away from this dude's pain. His mom being killed. I can't even fucking imagine. But when it comes down to it in the United States right now, you could take every true white supremacist in the United States, and they couldn't keep a fucking Walmart busy for an afternoon.
Will tell us how much it matters to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. Professor Turley.
Thank you, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, members of the Committee on the Judiciary. It's an honor to appear before you today to discuss the threat of domestic terrorism, a subject that should unite all Americans. You will find no disagreement among the witnesses on that worthy end. And while the means may be subject to qualifications, we share a common purpose in combating domestic terrorism. The powerful voice of Mr. Whitfield just now just reminds us of how urgent this task is. I offer my testimony in that spirit to try to identify areas of one of the pieces of legislation that I believe should be addressed to deal with some constitutional concerns. Extremist and violent speech is obviously not an abstraction for the people who work in this building. House members were shot in 2017. Members of both houses had to be rescued in 2020 due to a disgraceful attack on the Capitol. We all have ample reason to oppose these violent elements on both the left and the right. However, the Constitution does impose some limits on the range of action for Congress. I've tried to address those, ranging from the First Amendment to the separation of powers. I specifically address the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. I note in the testimony that aspects of the Act, in my view, are clearly constitutional. Those include things like the reporting and assessment and training components. The one area that I flag is the prioritization of particular terrorism cases. That raises a novel question. It actually falls into a gray area of separation of powers, so admittedly this can have people of good faith on either side. But for Congress to try to prioritize certain terrorism cases, I think would run afoul of the doctrine of separation of powers. And it's because the law uses a mandatory language in terms of dedicating resources within the executive branch for those ends.
Yeah, Mike. They want to act like the only people that can be racist are white people. Never mind the fact in my life I have run into many racists and run into many racists of many different colors. I've met some Korean people that were absolutely racist. I've met some black people who absolutely hated white people. Racism doesn't, just exist inside of one group. Is about the easiest way that I can put that. And you guys know it because you guys all have a little bit of sense.
There's obviously a powerful interest in Congress in this area. I'm a Madisonian scholar, so I tend to favor legislative authority. I still do in this area. But there's also admittedly countervailing legislative encroachment issues that can occur under the separation of powers. Because of the executive branch's authority under the Take Care Clause and the inherent Article 2 powers, I think that those issues would loom large if that legislation was enacted the way it's currently written. I also spent a considerable amount of time in my testimony on free speech. That's where I do a lot of my writing. I've been described as a free speech purist or absolutist. There was a time when that was actually a compliment. I admit to it. I have a very broad view of free speech. As I talk about in my testimony, we have a checkered history of free speech impairments and criminalization. It occurs at times when we are angry, when we're afraid, when we're under attack. Our history is replete with it. It began with John Adams, who not only tried to criminalize opposing views, but tried to execute those who held them. It went through the Civil War, it went through Woodrow Wilson and the Palmer raids, the enactment of the Espionage Act. In each of those periods, not one branch, but all three branches failed the Constitution. All three branches.
Yeah, too many choices. I'm right there with you. The only problem is stupid people breed faster than rabbits, because I'm pretty sure two stupid people can bump into each other on a street corner and produce another stupid person. So there's definitely no lack of stupid people in this world right now. Maybe it has to do with warning labels. Maybe we should just remove all the warning labels and let things sort themselves out. Get rid of bicycle helmets, give us back our lawn darts. Because I don't think we had this many stupid people when I was really young. But we didn't wear bicycle helmets. We played lawn darts, and there weren't near as many warning labels.
Allowed attacks to occur on free speech. It obviously continued with the Red Scare. It continues today as people call for forms of censorship, blacklisting, and criminalization of speech. I believe that this expansion of terrorist investigations raise legitimate questions.
Is it just me, or does he look like he's trying to fucking shit a pineapple right now?
That we have to deal with, not to intrude upon those areas. And that is a position that I've held for many years. As many of the members of this committee know, I've opposed broader interpretations of terrorism for 30 years. I've been one of the most vocal critics of Antifa, one of the most violent anti-free speech movements in our history. But I was one of the first to object to characterizing Antifa as a terrorist group for the same reason. We have to be very careful, not because we have different ends or different interests, but in a Madisonian system, it's often as important how you do something as what you do. Fortunately, even though we live in dangerous times, we have a Constitution designed for bad times, not good times. Indeed, the Constitution was written in the worst of times. It's a covenant, not with our government, but with each other. But it is a system that we can't assume is indestructible. It requires people of good faith like yourself to temper what are honest motives to try to combat extremism and protect those things that also define us. I thank you again for the honor of appearing before you, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Professor Turley. Professor Pape.
Well, one love, what you have to get is they're using this white supremacy buzzword, one, to create this ties in, if you didn't hear me earlier, this ties into another couple bills that I'm going to cover, which would basically create more prohibited possessors. Because if you were convicted of a misdemeanor crime of hate, or it had some classifier on it as a hate crime, misdemeanor, you would be a prohibited possessor. But it's also about a big domestic spying push that the Democrats are pushing through. So anything that you could say that on your social media or anything like that that they could term as it was being hate speech. Well, guess what? That also ties into the red flag laws. Like I said, Democrats have multi-pronged attacks and multi-pronged plans for what they want to do.
Thank you for having me. Mr. Whitfield is right. Violent populism is rising in America. Events like the Buffalo shooting that target minority populations and January 6th that threaten our democracy are not simply a continuation.
Threatened our democracy. If our country couldn't survive January 6th, then it needs to go the way of the damn dodo in the first damn place. Our Capitol has been bombed before. There have been people who have attacked the Capitol and actually shot people in the Capitol before. January 6th, which I watched live streams of that entire day from multiple angles, people got provoked by the police on January 6th, and they reacted to those police on January 6th. They also had some FBI rabble rousers in that crowd trying to get people riled up and to react. And they got exactly what they wanted. There weren't armed people on January 6th. No one was toting ARs. No one was toting AKs. The only person that got shot and killed was shot and killed by a Capitol police officer. And she was not a threat when she got shot in the fucking neck.
Of long-standing trends, but reflect the consequences of extremist ideas moving from the fringe to the mainstream. If I could please have the next slide. I'm going to wait one moment to see if we can have the slides.
Oh, my man bought PowerPoints with him. This ought to be good.
There we go. A key, if I could have the previous slide to that. Thank you. A key extremist idea is the Great Replacement. At bottom, the fear that minorities will have more rights than whites. As these extremist ideas become mainstream, domestic terrorism is evolving in more dangerous ways. On January 6, 2021, we witnessed, to quote Senator Mitch McConnell, a violent insurrection for the purpose of trying to prevent the peaceful transfer of power after a legitimately certified election. The key characteristic of...
Okay, anytime Democrats tell you something is legitimate, you automatically need to question that assumption or assertion.
The over 800 individuals charged in connection with the attack on the Capitol is that they are middle-class whites residing in counties with the most loss of white population.
So again, January 6th was rooted in racism, in case you guys aren't catching that.
Share exactly who would most likely fear the Great Replacement as described by prominent political and media leaders. On May 14th, just 3 weeks ago, a mass shooting occurred in Buffalo, New York, where the shooter, a self-described populist, methodically selected.
So let me get this straight with my man and his PowerPoints here. Somehow January 6th equates to a leftist statist going in and killing a bunch of people of a different race. Trying to do the math on this, kids. And as you perps might know already, I'm dyslexic and I'm not real great at math some days. So you guys help me out because I can't figure out the equation. Normally, from what I understand, you have to balance an equation. You know, what you do on one side has to be done with the other side. And, you know, it's pretty much equal. I'm not getting this one.
His target in order to kill large numbers of a minority group related to his...
Mike, yeah, you're right. Their lips are moving.
...fear of the Great Replacement. These violent ideas are widespread in the U.S. population, and we need to prepare for potential political violence in the future. Let's look at the facts. Next slide, please. The January 6th demographics are striking. Over half of those charged with committing crimes on January 6 were either business owners and CEOs or from white-collar occupations. The last time America saw middle-class whites involved in collective political violence was the expansion of the second KKK in the 1920s. Next slide. Nearly 90% charged were not members of militia and extremist groups like the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys. Next slide. Their political geography is also striking. Over half of those charged with committing crimes on January 6 came from counties that Biden won, including large, urban, Democratic strongholds like Dallas, Houston, New York City, Chicago, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. Next slide, please. The crucial feature of the counties with insurrectionists is the loss of non-Hispanic white population. The more the county lost white population and became diverse, the much higher rate of having an insurrectionist. Why? Increasingly, some politicians and media figures tell whites.
Yeah, dude, we already know where a lot of this is going to go. A lot of this goes to census. A lot of this goes to seats in Congress. If you can flood an area with a larger population, even if they don't vote, you can actually get more seats in the House and more seats in the Senate from them. So in effect, you can actually pack the House and the Senate.
They are deliberately being replaced by minorities and destined to become second-class citizens. White decline in one's community can reinforce and seemingly confirm these political and media narratives and have impact beyond electoral politics. Next slide. The Buffalo shooter is a prime example. The shooter's manifesto clearly describes his motive as targeting a minority population to prevent what he perceives as, quote, the complete racial and cultural replacement of white Americans. Next slide. Importantly, the shooter lived in Broome County, New York, which had one of the largest declines in non-Hispanic white population share since 2010, nearly 8%. This underscores that white population decline near their home can influence individuals with violent populist sentiments. To understand the risks going forward, we conducted a nationally representative survey with the respected polling firm NORC at the University of Chicago, fielded in April, just weeks ago. Next slide. We asked respondents whether they agree that Joe Biden stole the 2020 election and is an illegitimate president, and whether they agree that the use of force to restore Donald Trump to the presidency is justified. As you can see, tens of millions of Americans agree with these radical sentiments. Next slide. Most disturbing, we found that 7% of American adults, which equates to 18 million people, agree both that Joe Biden is illegitimate and that the use of force is justified to restore Trump to the presidency. This is important. A key indicator of long-term political violence in a country is the pool of the population that sees.
This guy's still going with his PowerPoint. I done checked on the kid, talked to the wife.
Political violence as justified, and so this figure is extremely concerning. Next slide.
All this coming from some people, they never acknowledge people like freaking what's her face? God, I can't believe I can't think of her name. You know, talking about, you know, if you see people out in public, you get in their face, you know, you surround them, you get a crowd. They never talk about the Democrats actually encouraging violence from the left. But hey, what do I know? It's just on video. It's
the two main beliefs driving the 18 million are, number one, the Great Replacement, 75% agree with that, and second, the QAnon cult idea. Next slide. We did look at economic and other factors, but the Great Replacement and QAnon conspiracies are the far more powerful drivers. Last slide, please. We need to go beyond prosecution.
Yeah, that's who it was. Maxine Waters was one of the big ones, talking about, you know, you see people out in public, you get in their face, you know, have this confrontation, and AOC running her smoker. Yeah, she's another one talking that same crap. man, it's upside down. And people, and again, getting back to people who actually buy this stuff, people who are following mainstream media, who don't spend the time to critically think about these things, who don't spend the time to research these things. They buy into everything these jackasses are saying.
And after the fact to prevention. Our country needs annual public reports by law enforcement assessing incidents in which people from across the political spectrum, from neo-Nazis to Antifa, turn to violence so that we can better understand the extent and source of the greatest threats. Our country needs a national conversation based on the facts about the consequences of violent ideas moving into the mainstream. Ultimately, the solutions to violent populism are the pillars that have always guided our great American democracy: dialogue and listening to.
Again, we're not a democracy. We were never a democracy. Our founders stated explicitly that democracy was a fucking bigger threat to liberty than a standing army. But after decades of letting the left have the education system, this is what we end up with. And there's an actor this dude reminds me of that played like a really, and I don't know, but this dude reminds me of him, and I can't put my finger on him. I'm having one of those brain fart days. Yeah, the founders absolutely hated democracy. Democracy is mob rule. Democracy is if I have 99 people, well, I get to take your shit. Or say if I have 58 people out of 100, we get to take your shit. That was never the way our system of government was supposed to be designed. Our founders stated it many times that they knew there were always going to be more uneducated people than educated people. So, in effect, they knew that you could have a government like ours who will take those uneducated people and use them to their own means. It's the useful idiots.
Each other. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Professor Pate. Mr. Herdman?
Thank you.
Tactical Pineapple, what's happening, brother man? Hey, how's the diet going, brother?
Chairman Durbin, and thank you, Ranking Member Grassley, for the invitation to speak before the committee on the vital issue of domestic terrorism.
Yeah. These folks, they've definitely never been punched in the face. And if they have been punched in the face, they haven't been punched in the face enough.
I've spent nearly 20 years of my professional career, mostly as a federal prosecutor, but also in the military, in the field of counterterrorism. While I bring to bear just one perspective on the work before the committee, I believe that my experience as a federal prosecutor in the Northern District of Ohio is of particular relevance on this subject.
Good deal, Tack. Just keep it up, brother. No matter how much it sucks, man, just keep rolling with it.
The Northern District of Ohio comprises the 40 northernmost counties of the state, and it's a true cross-section of modern America. I had the honor of serving this district as a Justice Department official, first as an Assistant United States Attorney from 2006 to 2013, and then as United States Attorney from 2017 to 2021. The title of this hearing, I believe, is fitting. In my career, I have seen the nature of the terrorist threat metastasize. And by that, I mean that the threat has both spread in that incidents are occurring at seemingly greater frequency, and changed in that the nature of that threat includes different actors offering new challenges to law enforcement. The tools brought to bear against terrorism, particularly domestic terrorism, have had to adapt as well. To help illustrate the changing nature of the terrorism threat, I would point to a few cases from my district on which I either worked directly as a prosecutor or supervised as U.S. Attorney. My early work as a federal prosecutor in the office's National Security Unit was primarily devoted to investigating and prosecuting cases involving international terrorism. But by 2010 in Ohio, we had started to observe an uptick in violent extremism with no connection to international terrorism. One example, in 2012, a group of 5 Cleveland area men.
Nice to see our elected leaders are so damn interested in the hearings they're in. Not to say that I would be all that interested in this hearing if I was sitting in it, but damn.
men who were self-proclaimed anarchists considered a variety of violent attacks.
What if he's over there playing Candy Crush?
Including the G8 summit in Chicago and the Republican National Convention in Tampa. Ultimately, they attempted to detonate an explosive device at the bottom of a support column beneath the Route 82 bridge in Brecksville, Ohio, a bridge that spans a deep crossing in the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and their intent was to bring down the entire bridge. In 2013, I was part of the trial team that prosecuted Joshua Stafford, who was the only conspirator from that group who went to trial. In addressing my tenure as U.S. Attorney and the varied threat picture that we faced, I would like to start by addressing the danger posed by white supremacists, either in an organized...
Yeah, you know, he mentions bombs there. Does he mention the marathon bombing that was done by, I don't know, a couple of Muslims, the Zanaev brothers? Just saying, there could be a few more things out there other than us crackers.
Or individual capacity. That threat is profound and it is pervasive. In 2019, a white supremacist named James Reardon was arrested by federal authorities for filming himself with a Nazi-era firearm, and over audio of multiple gunshots and screaming people in the background, threatening a mass shooting at the Jewish Community Center of Youngstown, Ohio. And this is a fitting place to pause, as the Jewish community is one with which I worked very closely as U.S. Attorney.
Did he ever work on cases against the Black Hebrew Israelites who actually went in and killed Jewish people? Because last time I heard, you had to be black to be a member of the Black Hebrew Israelites, kind of like the Nation of Islam. They ain't a whole lot of people that look like me.
White supremacists pose a serious and ongoing threat to our Jewish friends and neighbors, but they are by no means the only such threat. A case at our office prosecuted in late 2018 demonstrates the complex and serious threat picture faced by America's Jewish communities. Damon Joseph was a resident of Toledo, Ohio. He was a recent convert to Islam and a self-avowed adherent to violent jihad. Having been inspired by online videos and materials...
Oh, hell, he actually is mentioning one. Fucking props.
...materials produced by ISIS, Joseph became increasingly radicalized in the fall of 2018. After the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, Joseph conducted surveillance of 2 Toledo area synagogues and scripted a 9-point plan for inflicting mass casualties at those locations. He was arrested on December 10th, 2018, and ultimately...
What's up, AR? What's happening, brother? Yeah, I wasn't planning on going live tonight, guys. You guys that just showed up, I said it, and I've said it 100 times already. Apparently, Jerry Nadler and a few other Democrats actually are introducing legislation to pack the Supreme Court. So they want to go from 9 to 13. They want to put 4 more seats on the Supreme Court. And then this hearing right here ties into a couple of other things that I still have to cover, a couple of the bills. ADX, you talking about plasma cuts? Yes, sir. I am still doing plasma cuts.
Pleaded guilty to both federal terrorism and federal hate crimes charges, which, as far as I am aware, was the first time a prosecution for both of these offenses had been pursued. I raised the Joseph case because I think it amply illustrates the grave threat posed to the United States and law enforcement by a host of violent actors. The threat picture that emerged while I was U.S. Attorney was incredibly complicated. While white supremacy and violent jihad offers adherents a somewhat cohesive set of warped principles that ultimately forms an ideology, I saw several cases that defied easy categorization because of blended, evolving, or simply non-existent ideologies. For example...
Yeah, AR, man, hang in there, brother. And God knows, man, if there's anything a lot of us can do for you, I know you're not the kind that's going to ask for help or anything, but hell, if you need something, man, let us know. If we can help you out, brother, just to make things easier on you, we will. You know, that's just the way we is, homeboy. So just hang in there. Hell, if you need someone to talk to, you can jump in live streams. Fuck it, man. Come on.
Elizabeth Lacron and Vincent Armstrong were a Toledo area couple who harbored a deep fascination with the Columbine shootings. During the course of the FBI investigation, the couple visited Columbine High School, and over time, this sick obsession with that event moved...
Oh, yeah, AR, this is definitely deliberate. and I said it early on the live stream, this ties into some domestic spying bills that these guys want to do. This ties into a lot of the red flag laws that they're doing right now. And then they want to push more gun control. I won't be surprised if in this hearing, if we make it through more of it, where you hear more shit about ghost guns and that being the preferred weapon of white supremacists. I won't be surprised if that comes up at all. Because this is a hearing that I haven't watched yet.
Into active planning for a mass casualty attack at a specific Toledo bar. Elizabeth Lacron separately attempted to acquire an explosive device for use against a gas pipeline. They were arrested in December 2018, and Lacron was ultimately convicted of attempting to provide material support to terrorism in violation of 18 U.S.C. 2339A. Two more cases, Christian Ferguson and Alan Kenna, were both arrested in 2020 in separate cases. Ferguson was plotting to lie in wait for a law enforcement officer and planned to capture or kill them when they responded to a false 911 call. And Kenna had well-developed plans to attack an Ohio high school with explosives and firearms.
I'll be back.
I focused on these cases, but there are many more from my tenure as U.S. Attorney that kept me up at night as a federal prosecutor and continue to do so today, even though I'm no longer a Justice Department official. Once again, I appreciate this opportunity to address the committee, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
Thanks, Mr. Herdman. Mr. German.
Chair Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify about white supremacist violence in the wake of the latest mass casualty attack. I'd like to express the Brennan Center's sympathies for the family members of those killed in Buffalo and all communities targeted by white supremacists.
Yeah, if you've never looked up the Brennan Center, yeah, they're a bunch of anti-gun pricks. Yeah, dude, South Africa. Yeah. Anybody that was over there, of course, they took most of the land away from any of the white landowners, which, I mean, Dutch descendants, the Boers. They took their land away, gave it back to the people, as they put it. And then the people basically couldn't work the land. They were starving and decided to kill anybody that was white. So, yeah, there's that.
Violence. I've been working on this problem since 1992, when the FBI assigned me to infiltrate neo-Nazi skinhead cells trafficking in illegal weapons and committing acts of violence. While recent attacks have raised public awareness of white supremacist and far-right militant violence, it isn't new. It's been an enduring threat in the United States since its founding. Yet the law enforcement response remains deficient, despite deadly results. The FBI does not even collect incident data regarding violence committed by domestic violence extremist groups. Professor Pape discussed the Great Replacement theory, which also isn't new. I agree it's too easy to blame social media for spreading racist conspiracy theories, as they are and always have been part of our political discourse, part of our mainstream political discourse. But policing that discourse should not be a law enforcement matter. The vast majority of people who traffic in racist, hateful theories don't present a threat of violence. Law enforcement should instead focus narrowly on those that do, investigate their crimes thoroughly, and target their instrumentalities. It seems intuitive that effective social media monitoring might provide clues that could help law enforcement prevent that attack. After all, the white supremacist attackers in Buffalo, Pittsburgh, and El Paso all gained access to materials online and expressed their hateful and violent intentions on social media. If somebody had reported this activity to law enforcement, it is presumed the police could act to prevent an attack.
Now, in many of these cases, these shooters were known to law enforcement. Law enforcement had many interactions with them before they actually committed these shootings. So what in the fuck is Mullet Boy right here talking about? Business in the front, party in the back. But yeah, I mean...
But threatening rhetoric is commonplace, and not just on social media. In the Buffalo case, threats the shooter allegedly made in school were reported to law enforcement, resulting in a psychological evaluation, but no follow-up. Perhaps that's because broad-scale social media monitoring and see something, say something programs raise so many false alarms.
Now, understand, this guy is talking about more domestic spying when he's talking about these monitoring programs. Yeah, AR. It's, you know, they're talking about this, white supremacy right now. And ultimately what this is coming down to is the government targeting people because of their race, people like me, people who own guns, people who believe in freedom. Him talking about, spy or looking at people's social media. And now he's talking some about false hits right now. But that's not going to stop the government from looking. That wouldn't stop the government from putting, say, a red flag on somebody like myself, because I say something along the lines of the government is full of shit. They're a bunch of liars, and they want to take your rights and take your guns and take your freedoms.
Alarms that it drowns out threats, overwhelms law enforcement, and dulls their response. Law enforcement's tendency to downplay the threat of white supremacist violence may have also played a role. Unfortunately, while counterterrorism experts acknowledge that white supremacists and far-right militants are the most persistent and lethal threats in the FBI's domestic terrorism program, law enforcement has a history of prioritizing lesser threats, particularly protest movements led by people of color, civil rights activists, peace activists, and environmentalists. Failing to produce domestic terrorism incident data leaves the Justice Department and the FBI free to set priorities based on their own institutional biases. If law enforcement is to be effective in addressing white supremacist violence, it is essential to better understand how the violent element within the white supremacist movement operates. Congress has done its part to provide the FBI with all the authority it needs. 51 federal crimes of terrorism, 5 federal hate.
Dude, ADX, yeah. Let me get back to where I can actually focus on some stuff maybe this next week, and I'll see about drawing something up. Hit me up on Instagram, and I will send you. So hopefully by the end of next week, I'll send you a design that's pretty similar to that. See what you think.
Crime statutes, organized crime, and conspiracy statutes. The problem is that the Justice Department and the FBI choose not to prioritize white supremacist violence, and they obscure the data that's necessary to drive reform. If a white supremacist murders somebody, the FBI could consider the crime an act of domestic terrorism, a hate crime, or simply a violent crime. If the FBI categorized it as domestic terrorism, the investigation would be well-resourced and robustly investigated. But it often puts white supremacist violence into lower prioritized programs such as civil rights and violent crimes, where by Justice Department policy, most incidents are deferred to state and local police for investigation. When Senator Durbin introduced the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act in 2017, seeking specific data about white supremacist and far-right militant violence and the FBI's use of its domestic terrorism resources, the FBI instead shuffled its domestic terrorism categories to obscure this data. The Justice Department likewise hides its data about domestic terrorism prosecutions, removing docket numbers from prosecutive data it provides to Congress when it claims domestic terrorism successes. The Brennan Center sued to get these docket numbers, but the Justice Department refused to provide them all, claiming that not all prosecutions that it claims as domestic terrorism statistics are domestic terrorists. The true nature and the scope of white supremacist threat must be understood in order to establish effective reforms. Congress needs better data about this violence and more transparency about how the Justice Department and the FBI use their domestic terrorism resources. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses. I'm going to start with the 5-minute round. Professor Pape, great replacement theory is nothing new. Some form of it has been around forever. In the United States, we've seen evidence of it.
Yes,
the
they are.
Activities of the Ku Klux Klan during Reconstruction and even into the 20th century. I grew up in East St. Louis, Illinois, in the early.
Now, notice when these Democrats talk about the Ku Klux Klan, they never actually admit that the Ku Klux Klan was basically the militant wing of the Democrat Party.
Early 1900s, with the Great Migration, there was a visceral reaction against African Americans that led to a race riot in that city, as well as my current hometown of Springfield, Illinois, and that led to the creation of the NAACP. So we've seen this many times over. The only question that comes to my mind is, this a different time? Do you find in your research that the social media approach to information in America is exacerbating this situation? Can we add to that the automatic weapons that are now giving to these madmen who are inspired by this racism the means to kill so many innocent people as they did in Buffalo? Is that the difference?
So there's two big differences, sir.
More gun control.
First, we have volatile capabilities. Those are the weapons you're talking about, now combined with volatile ideas and beliefs in the mainstream. It's not one or the other. You've got the combination of these two.
Exactly.
Which is why we're seeing many more of these events in the United States than we are, say, in Britain. And this is a very important combination that's a deadly cocktail that
No, in Britain, you may not see a mass shooting, but you, however, will see a immigrant hack off the head of a guard in broad damn daylight in front of God and everybody. These people are insane, man. Absolutely insane.
Promises more violence going forward. The second big change is that we are now seeing those who advocate the Great Replacement receive political benefits and financial benefits. So if we look at politicians in America in the mainstream are either directly or indirectly stressing the Great Replacement and becoming more popular. Donald Trump, the former president of the United States, is more powerful today as a result of January 6th than he would have been without January 6th. That is a very, very worrisome trend, sir. Media figures, you just showed a number of them, they are more popular today as a result of the Great Replacement. So what we are seeing is we are seeing incentives for more politicians, more media figures to follow in those paths. These are the two big changes today and why we have to be so concerned about the 2022 and especially 2024 election seasons.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you, we really have a challenge to respect the Constitution and our Bill of Rights and freedom of speech, and yet we see the reality reported to us by law enforcement here in Washington and across the nation that many of these statements are pushing people into extreme behavior, violent behavior. There's no easy way to define a line to be drawn here to respect the Constitution and still keep America safe. What are your thoughts?
I think that the concept of terrorism radicalization that the FBI and Justice Department have embraced, it isn't established in evidentiary studies. My own experience working undercover, there were people who were ardent neo-Nazis, had memorized parts of Hitler's speeches, were very influenced by the ideology, and others who just liked to make bombs. And this was a group that appreciated their bomb-making skills. So understanding how the violent element operates and how it networks is much more important than understanding the ideology, because there are lots of people who adopt this ideology who are actually against violence. I had people who were ardent Nazis find out who I was hanging out with in the movement and put their arm around me and say, son, you're hanging out with the wrong people. Come work with us. We'll print up a newsletter that we can put out every week. We'll put a suit on you and run you for the school board. We can do things that don't involve violence because that will get you killed or put in prison, and that won't help the movement. So it's
Nah, Mike, we're drinking Stones tonight. That's the go-to cheap beer. Good old Keystones. The link I just posted in chat, since this guy mentioned, the UK and all this shit. This is where a immigrant from an African country hacked a soldier to death in broad fucking daylight and cut his goddamn head off in front of everybody. So yeah, don't tell me that, America is the only place with issues with extremists. You lying sack of shit.
very critically important for law enforcement to understand these differences and understand how the violent element works. And my concern is this radicalization theory pushes law enforcement to want to grab more information from social media or other public forms of communication rather than focusing on the far, in which millions of people share these bad ideas, instead of focusing on the relatively smaller number of violent acts and understanding how they network. One of the things that the brilliant case agent who worked my first case with me was able to do in Los Angeles was map all the violent.
Now, you guys remember Ruby Ridge. Ruby Ridge got started because they said that, oh God, I can't think of his name. They said he was selling short-barreled shotguns, or they wanted him to sell short-barreled shotguns to a white supremacist group. And when he wouldn't play along with the government, well, then they went in and tried to smash him and ended up killing his wife, his kid. And then ultimately, when everything went to trial, he walked because the government had no case.
Criminal acts that were occurring by white supremacists, and show how there was some connection between lots of them, and that's what justified the investigation.
I wonder if this cat is old enough. He might have been around during Ruby Ridge.
Investigation to start doing that investigation. But today, because the FBI puts these in different categories and more often than not defers to state and local investigators who may or may not prosecute those crimes, they don't have knowledge of how the criminal element works. And unfortunately, they don't seem to want it. There have been plenty of opportunities for them to actually collect this data about the violent crimes to understand it better, but they choose not to. And I think that's part of the problem.
It's a point that you made earlier, and one that I'll close with here, and that is the reason for the Domestic Terrorism Act that I introduced was the decision of the Trump administration to no longer have a category of white supremacist crime reported to us. They merged it into a violent crime general category so that there would be no distinction. I believe more information is better, particularly when it doesn't expand the authority of the government or give it any new tools, but really reports on the reality of
what's up, Vanessa.
What's happening across America. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Grassley.
Yes, Mr. Herdman, besides the bridge case, you've been involved with the riots that broke out in 2020. The FBI lacked the familiarity with
Yeah, too many choices. Yeah, I remember starting to remember some of that. Yeah, they wanted him to. And yeah, as you mentioned it, yeah, there was no proof that the guns were actually, or that the barrels were actually too short. If those of you out there don't know, when you measure a barrel for length, you actually assemble the firearm and you drop a dowel down the barrel so that it drops all the way to the breech face. Then you mark it and you measure from your mark to where it actually engaged with the breech face, and that is your barrel length. Don't bite me, you crackhead. So there, in his case, yeah, I don't think there was any evidence that came out that said he actually cut barrels under 18 inches, or barrels that would have measured under 18 inches. which is another reason when everything went to court, even after all the shooting and everything else, there were no charges that stuck with him. And I think he actually ended up suing the government, or his daughter did, and at least got something out of that deal.
Antifa movement to see violence or new riots coming, something both Barr and Wolf warned about when they were secretaries. You've also seen...
Yeah, Vanessa, I know one, or it was sent back to the lower courts, the lower district courts, which the lower district courts are going to play fuck games with that all the way. But today, old Jerry Nadler stated him and some other guys from the House are actually submitting bills to pack the Supreme Court. So they want to add 4 more seats to the Supreme Court, which we knew this shit was coming. They've been talking about it for a while now. So as soon as that legislation gets published, I'm going to do a video on that. But that's how this whole live stream started out tonight. And then we just went down other rabbit trails. So. Yeah, Mike, the federal government has a freaking history of doing that shit. And I'll look him up again. I'll look him up later. But yeah, the federal government's got a history of doing this shit. This whole January 6th stuff, they had FBI informants out there that were riling the crowd up. And when the crowd reacted to the police and it became a fight, you had people there from the federal government who were just ramping the crowd up even further.
Threats from white racists, jihadists, and actors with anti-law enforcement ideologies.
Oh, Vanessa, wait, because I promise you, they will kill the filibuster. And then that whole vote is going to be on the shoulders. Well, in the Judiciary Committee, it's not going to matter. They'll push it through. When it goes to the full Senate, that whole vote is going to basically sit on the shoulders of Joe Manchin. And I wouldn't be surprised whether a Republican crossed the line and actually voted for the shit. So, no, they don't need 60 votes. They are going to need a simple majority to push that shit through. That sounds about right, Mike. Hang them out to dry. Use them for everything they can, then hang them out to dry.
How do we ensure that the Department of Justice and the FBI are nimble and flexible, just enough to respond to threats of violence caused by different ideologies? And how varied is the domestic terrorism threat right now?
Thank you, Senator. Well, the bottom...
Vanessa, I would not bet money on that. Especially with what we're running up now, where we're right against the midterm elections, and there are a whole lot of people that are pushing for it. Any Democrat that says they're not pushing for it, with the exception of maybe Joe Manchin, is flat out lying to you. And there will be some Republicans that will probably cross that line. So, yeah, hold on to your kitty. We'll see how everything does in 2022 in the midterms. If the midterms go like the 2020 election, they're going to get it, and they will pack the court. There won't be any stopping them.
Line is, if you're in federal law enforcement, you have to look at the conduct and the threat as it is being contemplated. So you look to the violent act, you look to the planning, and you look to the preparation. And frankly, the ideology matters far less when you're trying to disrupt a terrorism event than the actual conduct of the perpetrators. And it has to be that way. Now, ultimately at trial, that ideology or whatever is motivating that person to commit this act is important, because it's motive evidence and it's something that you would want before the jury. But you have to have federal law enforcement postured to be able to identify and respond to actual conduct by individuals, and that requires well-trained agents and prosecutors, that requires close coordination with local law enforcement, that requires close coordination with communities, particularly vulnerable communities, like I mentioned in my testimony, the Jewish community among them, Muslims as well, a whole host of communities of color and ethnicity that are under threat. You have to be postured to be able to respond. And also, I would add, Senator, you have to be flexible in the way that you intake complaints. It's very important for federal law enforcement to be responsive to complaints from the public and to ensure that they are able to prioritize and respond to complaints that are brought to their attention.
Professor Turley, is it constitutional and prudential to direct executive branch offices to investigate in combating violence committed pursuant to some extremist ideology more than others?
I think that it is at best problematic. I actually think it does run afoul of separation of powers. I admit that this is that sort of gray area. Separation of powers is not hermetically sealed. There are overlaps between the executive and legislative. But I think this would not fare well in terms of trying to force a priority between individual cases. The Supreme Court has said over and over again, in the cases that I cite, in cases like Quinn, that even though this body itself has investigatory powers, it cannot intrude upon the choice of targets, development of cases, priorities given to particular areas by the executive branch. That's pretty consistent coming out of the Supreme Court and lower court cases. So that's the one flag that I threw on the act, and that I think that the Congress needs to really seriously consider that. As someone who represented one of the houses of Congress, the other house, in litigation, you know, one of the keys is that you don't want to go into litigation unless you have a fairly good idea of how you're going to come out, because you don't want to create precedent against your own institution. I would not view this as a very good course for this body, because I think that courts would look with disfavor on an effort to force the executive branch to prioritize particular types of cases within the category of terrorism.
Mr. Herdman, is it helpful to design executive branch offices around national security threats that exist today, or is it changing so rapidly that there's a benefit to flexibility?
I would always err in favor of flexibility, Senator. There are, in a moment's notice, the entire threat picture faced by federal law enforcement in the United States could change. It could change as a result of an international incident. It could change as a result of some domestic political event. And I think, you know, federal law enforcement has to be able to respond in a way that addresses the threat as it exists today, as opposed to what it was yesterday or what it was in preceding years. We just have to have that kind of flexibility from federal law enforcement.
Mr. Herdman, in your testimony, you noted many instances in which civilian communities, such as local Jewish community in Cleveland, were targets of attack. You formed strong partnerships to help you disrupt those threats. We're seeing that police are now increasingly becoming targeted for extremist violence. I've introduced a bill to gather more information on attacks on police. What else can we do to combat the rising tide of extremism, violence directed against the police?
Yeah, this is a real area of concern. Again, this is one of those things that does not depend on ideology. If somebody is willing to engage in a violent attack, they've almost always contemplated some sort of engagement with law enforcement. And that leads to, unfortunately, proactive planning by perpetrators when they are actually seeking out to kill.
Well, I mean, Mike, that's how the feds are always going to work, and they do it, and hell, local law enforcement does it. Catch something that's kind of small, something that might jam somebody up, and then it's wheeling and dealing from there. If you do this for us, then, you know, we'll drop these charges, or we will lessen these charges, or you can plead these charges out if you do this for us. And they're going to use you until you're basically spent, and then they're going to turn around and fuck you over. That's they've done that for decades. That's the way they operate.
Capture, kidnap law enforcement. So I would certainly be supportive of any federal effort to look into the incidents of terrorism directed at law enforcement. And I also certainly would be supportive of any federal measure that would seek to criminalize attacks that are made with the intent of killing law enforcement because of their status.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Chair Durbin. I appreciate you holding this hearing because I find it difficult to comprehend we're still in this position. We're having the same conversation we've had for years now about domestic terrorism, the racist ideologies motivating violence that are spreading across this country with little or no check against it. Each day and each week seems to bring new tragic incidents. Increasing number committed by individuals who hold white supremacist ideologies. No one should be afraid of being murdered because they went to their grocery store or went to their place of worship or when they go to work, even here in the United States Capitol. And yet that's the reality facing millions of Americans every day. The heinous mass shooting in Buffalo last month is a painful reminder that domestic terrorism, motivated by white supremacists, is still very present.
Yeah, too many choices. Yeah, this quickly devolved into another share the pain stream for sure. Yeah, take you a break because I know 280 will be on in a little while. As soon as he starts to go live, I'm going to bounce because I'm going to listen to his show, and then I'm going to bounce from his. I'll do like I normally do. I'm going to bounce from his show over to Tactical Pineapple, watch my man Pineapple, and then probably back to the bacon whenever he goes live. So, yeah, this wasn't a planned live stream tonight. This all came off of. I was doing research on a bill, and today at work I heard old Jerry Nadler's Humpty Dumpty ass talking about packing the Supreme Court, and then it just all kind of ran together. One love, take it easy, brother. We'll catch you. You have a great weekend, man. I'm sure I'll probably see you on another stream at some point. Yeah. I figured 2A would be live, like 9:30, something like that. So yeah, as soon as he goes live, I'm gonna bounce to him and go hang out with everybody. Because I just, he's another show that I love to watch his show too. So we'll hang out and do this for a little while, and as soon as we see some cats go live, we're gonna freaking bounce.
It is spreading in the United States. That's not hyperbole, that's a fact. Look to the FBI. They reported the number of hate crimes in 2020 was the highest recorded in 2 decades.
Now, they changed the definition of a hate crime in, I think, 2018. That's how they get the numbers that they're getting now. See, I'm getting the alert for 2A soon in 30 minutes. So, yeah, it'll go live at 9:30. So, yeah, they changed the definition of a hate crime in like 2018. So, therefore, they could pump the numbers up.
Nearly half of the domestic terrorism investigations that year involved racially motivated violent extremists. 87% of the subjects of those investigations were white supremacists. And now we have another unspeakable tragedy. 10 individuals killed in Buffalo while shopping at their local grocery store, something we all do and which should be the safest place. But they died at the hands of an individual who'd been motivated by a racist conspiracy theory. There's going to be accountability for these crimes. We also...
Now, here's one. Give me a whole effing chat if you were shopping at the local grocery store and a shooting started and you would like to be able to shoot back. Because my idea behind it is if a shooting started while I'm at my grocery store or at my Walmart, of course, I'm going to be carrying, and I'm going to pull my family and whoever else is with me back to an area that I can control, whether it is a customer service desk, a bathroom, you name it, and anything that enters that area, I am fucking shooting in the face. So you had you had two guys that were armed. You had a security guard who popped this guy in the vest. Someone else said that he wasn't even wearing plates in his vest, so I don't quite understand that. I think it was Legally Armed America that was talking about that. But yeah, I want to be able to shoot back in that case. I'm not waiting on the police to do like they did in Uvalde, where the police show up and then pull out, let everybody else get shot, and then they do something. And especially in Uvalde, considering it was a classroom that had outside windows where you could have hit that guy from two different angles and drilled his ass before he could have killed all those kids. The more and more I think about that shooting, the more and more it pisses me the fuck off. Especially considering the other morning, 2 mornings ago, something like that, I'm headed to work and I throw on iHeartRadio, local news. It's about the only news that I really listen to. And come to find out, there was a cop who had a direct shot on this guy before he entered the building and did not take the shot. He could have ended the whole situation right there and been done. Shooter on the ground, dead, and he did not take the shot. I don't give a shit whether he was waiting on command to tell him to take the shot. If there is an armed shooter about to enter a building with kids, I will be goddamned if I'm not putting that sumbitch in the dirt. If there are kids getting shot, I will be damned whether I'm pulling out of that building. I'm either going to die or I'm going to shoot the son of a bitch trying to shoot kids. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm easygoing as I can be. I do not respond well to people pressuring me. And I've been in a lot of situations like that. Do I think I would react any different to someone trying to shoot kids? No. You fuck around at my child's school, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to shoot you right in the damn face. If you have already shot my daughter at that point, I'm going to shoot you a lot. I'm going to get my money's worth out of that shit.
I have to act against the root causes of this growing hate. And
from the third world. So I hit the wrong button and went all over the place. But yeah, if Mike Glover from Fieldcraft did a video on it, yeah, I got to check his stuff out because freaking Mike is on the ball.
By this racism.
See if I can figure out where in the hell we were at. Goddamn old Dickety Durbin.
Perpetrators, and it has to be that way. Now, ultimately, at trial, that ideology or whatever is motivating that person.
All right, Mike. We'll see you later, brother. We'll probably see you on 2A stream.
This is that sort of gray area. Separation of powers is not hermetically sealed. There are overlaps between the executive and legislative. But I think this would not fare well in terms of trying to force a priority between individual cases. The Supreme Court has said over and over again, and the keys is
change as a result of an internet out to kill, capture, kidnap.
Incidents. Increasing number committed by individuals who hold white supremacist
Patrick
ideology.
Lay's old dusty ass.
You know, no one should be afraid of being murdered because they went to their grocery store or went to their place of worship, or when they go to work, even here in the United States Capitol. And yet that's the reality facing millions of Americans every day. The heinous mass shooting in Buffalo last.
Yeah, Tori, we're going to have to play that game, brother. I might have to just say perpetrator just for the fun of it.
But it's a painful reminder that domestic terrorism, motivated by white supremacists, is still very present and is spreading in the United States. That's not hyperbole, that's a fact. Look to the FBI. They reported the number of hate crimes in 2020 was the highest recorded in 2 decades. Nearly half of the domestic terrorism investigations that year involved racially motivated violent extremists. 87% of the subjects of those investigations were white supremacists. Now we have another unspeakable tragedy. 10 individuals killed in Buffalo while shopping at their local grocery store, something we all do and which should be the safest place. But they died at the hands.
This Joker hadn't shopped at his local grocery store in decades.
Of an individual who'd been motivated by a racist conspiracy theory. There's going to be accountability for these crimes. We also have to act against the root causes of this growing hate. And, as the opening of the chair stated, we need not look further than certain political leaders and media pundits who fan the flames of these ideologies. And in doing that, they give them the sheen of legitimacy. We certainly cannot stand by as they're given mainstream validation. We can be heartbroken, but we must be resolute because lives depend on our ability to extinguish the flames of hatred and violence permeating our country. We say we'll pray for the victims. In my state, we pray that the Congress and all of us will come together and pass real laws that will protect us. We have to stand up to misinformation. We have to act together. This should be above politics. And Mr. Whitfield, I was so moved listening to your testimony and what you said about your mother, Ruth Whitfield.
Nosy.
My heart goes out to you.
Why
And everybody
come in and automatically turn on lights?
who lost
Because
people
it's
at
dark in here and I
the
can't see that blue light. It
top
my eyes.
spending markets grocery store. I think your parents married
I'm
68
sorry, I
years.
have to listen to
I
your
think of that
phone
as I'll celebrate
all night.
this summer my 60th
Not
anniversary.
feel that.
You said your mother was the heart and rock of your family. I know what that means. What would you like us to know about your mother, Ruth, and how your family's been impacted by that?
Got to try to pull on them heartstrings.
Thank you, Senator. I'd like you to know that my mother's life mattered.
I'm ruining.
I'd like you to know that
And he hurt himself.
there's nothing that we can do to bring her back.
I don't have a horse. I have a moose.
I'd like you to know that she didn't deserve to be murdered.
He's a lumbering oaf.
I'd like you to know that she was, while she was yet alive, equally frustrated with the banter and the discussions that have gone on for years
Then you get to take a picture.
about white supremacy and inequities within our society. And while
Funky
she
on
was
John's
alive,
going live.
she spoke vigorously against it. In her death, we're here to carry her legacy forward. And to do what she's no longer able to do. We're here to ask the people here to do their jobs, to live up to the oath.
Now, the thing that sucks is this Buffalo shooter will more than likely be tried federally. So his court case won't be publicized. It won't be where we can watch it. I'm glad the little douchebag didn't get to commit suicide and then not have to stand trial. But I wish his trial would actually be where we could watch it.
What makes you think he was going to commit suicide?
Oh, the Buffalo shooter? No, he didn't get a chance to commit suicide. My wife was asking me. He didn't get a chance to commit suicide.
To serve and protect.
Yeah, he was going to.
People in this country.
I think when they called him, he had the
That's
gun
what
to his
we're here
head.
for. We're not here to ask for favors. we're not here to debate this. This has been going on. You know, this didn't start with my mother's passing. This has been going on my whole life.
Yeah.
I was born black, and I was treated differently from the day I was born in this country. And it's time we stood up and recognized that. It's not okay.
Filling out. We were talking about my wife's horse, but
and we can't keep ignoring
as long as he's filling out, it'll be okay.
He's not black anymore.
Thank you, sir.
I thank you, and I pray that we will.
And for those of you, which I haven't talked about it yet, my wife got a rescue horse who was way underweight and has one eye.
Well, he has two eyes. One's just, it's blue.
Yeah, well, he's blind in one eye. So she's trying to put weight on him and get him back into shape. So.
Basically, what I bought is a glue stick that has no grace whatsoever, no coordination.
He's a big Tennessee walker.
I got a 16-hand.
Do the right thing for all Americans. So in my family, for my black grandchildren and my white grandchildren, I pray we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Leahy. Senator Lee?
Oh, Deb says no to your.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Turley, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. You recently wrote about the cases of two attorneys, Collinford Mattis and Aruj Rahman. Each of these two defendants was facing domestic terrorism charges based on allegations that they had thrown a Molotov cocktail into a police vehicle during the Antifa riots during the summer of 2020. Despite pleading guilty last year to one count.
Yeah, Tortown, my wife is yeah, well, she took me in, so obviously she can take in an underweight horse.
When were you ever underweight?
I was just talking about me being jacked up, not necessarily underweight.
I do like fucked up things. I do.
Well, this is true.
Beat down, broken.
Yeah, and if you guys can't hear, she likes fucked up, beat down, broken things, so that's why she married me.
Out of possessing and making an explosive device, which, as I understood it, should have carried
apparently I like multiple
10-year
personality complexes.
Minimum sentence. The Biden administration, if I understand it correctly, has just agreed to a new plea agreement that'll result in just a few years of prison time. Professor Turley, are violent attacks on police officers with explosive devices under this circumstance, are they domestic terrorism events, or are they domestic terror threats?
That horse was
well, they certainly can be under the definition that you have at 18 U.S.C. 2331. It can fit into that. You know, there are arguments to be made why they decided to downgrade that case from terrorism. And the plea that you referred to didn't receive a huge amount of condemnation because it was still, as you noted, a plea to an offense that was a 10-year offense. To keep in mind, one of these individuals was trying to hand out Molotov cocktails for other people to throw them, and the other one, when she was arrested, said that it was unapologetic.
Speaking of that, one of them got a hold of whiteout.
Understand violence when we speak through violence. So these were quite strong cases. They were captured on videotape. So it was surprising when the Department of Justice came in and said, we're going to let you withdraw the earlier plea and then plea down. And as a criminal defense attorney, I thought it was really quite astonishing. I've done national security litigation. I haven't seen anything quite like that double step down with to remove the earlier plea. So I think it was very controversial.
Do it on my laptop.
And I'm saying that I want to emphasize that I think people of good faith can say that the original designation of the case is terrorism. I can see arguments that this should not fall within that definition. People of good faith can disagree on that. It was the step down from the original plea that was so astonishing for some of us.
Okay.
Ow! My wife's throwing shit.
One of the things that I
worry
about with all of this is that anytime there is an act of domestic terrorism, it should be prosecuted. Domestic terrorism is bad, regardless of what ideology happens to flow from it. And one of the concerns that I've heard expressed about the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act, concerns that have been attributed to Department of Justice, career attorneys in reviewing the legislation, is they worry that this could
artificially constrain the department's resources, directing them toward one particular ideology over another. With domestic terrorism, as in so many other areas of criminal law, there is a high likelihood that what's big one year might change the next year. What's happening a lot in one season of 1 year might change in the next season of that same year. So my concern would be if we start adopting legislation that directs our activities, devotes more resources to one particular ideology over another, that might leave prosecutors flat-footed when the circumstances change, and that could create other problems. Now, Mr. Herdman, what would be the practical result, in your view, of various executive office reorganizations that would be required within the Department of Justice under the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act?
Well, I think one concern that I would have is from the perspective of, say, a rabbi in suburban Cleveland.
You got way better hoodies.
Whether the threat to my synagogue is from a white supremacist, or it's from a violent jihadist, or it's from some other group, that doesn't matter to me as much as the fact that there is a threat that's existent, and federal law enforcement has to be able to respond to the threat to that particular target. So I would worry a little bit about escalating or elevating a particular threat profile because you may unintentionally lose sight of other threats. I think it's better to have a flexible federal law enforcement response.
I'll guarantee you that.
Well, I've got you on this point. I wanted to ask you about something. In the aftermath of the extensive violence that occurred in the summer of 2020, particularly in Portland, Oregon.
I'm sorry, but Mike Lee still looks like he's melting in his lap driving a panel van.
They brought federal charges against 97 defendants. Now, there were other defendants who were charged in connection with those riots, many of them in state court. These 97 were just the federal charges brought in that district. 58 of those 97 have now been dismissed. Now, I know you're a former U.S. attorney. When I was a federal prosecutor, it would have been unusual to dismiss such a large percentage of any category of indictments.
He's more than likely fine. He just freaking rolled something.
But if 58 of those 97 have now been dismissed, it has me scratching my head. Do you have any idea why these cases against those particular violent extremists were dismissed in such high numbers?
I really don't know enough about those cases, Senator, to be able to reflect on it. The only thing I would say is what our guideposts were when we were federal prosecutors was, do the facts fit the violation of a federal statute? And if they do, you pursue prosecution. And I don't know if that's what happened in the case of those dismissals or not. I just don't know.
Real beer.
Real beer.
Real beer.
Thank you.
Say that 10 times.
Senator Lee, Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you,
Oh, Whitehouse.
And,
this dude's a douchebag.
Welcome to the witnesses, particularly Mr. Whitfield. At 86, your mom deserved a hell of a lot better.
No, that's okay. It's just
welcome Mike German in particular back to the committee, because when he got off his undercover work with the FBI, he came to Rhode Island when I was U.S. attorney and was one of the agents in our FBI field office, and I've had the chance to see the quality of his work firsthand.
Chicago Mike the Shooter just posted a video.
A couple of questions.
You guys aren't following Chicago Mike the Shooter?
Does history show incidences
he's only had his channel
when
out for a little
violence
while.
against a population was preceded by propaganda against that population?
Yes, sir. Northern Ireland is probably our key case we should focus on. In Northern Ireland, there was community support for violence among Catholics in the late 1960s, immediately preceding the rise of the IRA.
So let me jump in and ask if the lesson of history here is also that sometimes the propaganda against that population is deliberate.
Yes, sir. The key part of the deliberate that matters, and this is also critical in the Great Replacement, is the intentionality that's attributed to the.
There's Chicago Mike's channel in case you guys want to check him out.
So what you saw on the video that Senator Durbin showed
We
wasn't
got about
just simply
8
claims
minutes, and
of
then we're going to jump
demographic
over
change.
to
The core
280
part,
EU.
the anger that creates the violence, is the malicious intent ascribed to those political
conditioned
actors.
it.
And
So
Mr.
that-
German,
I know,
are
I
there
spend all
indications
that freaking money on
that
expensive stuff, and I still not the
propagation
That's because you got that
of
kind of
great
hair.
replacement theory
kind of hair that grows on monkey's butt.
is
The kind of hair that grows on a
deliberate?
monkey's ass.
Certainly, and I
Over
think
in
it's
Amber
important to
Apes.
make a distinction between
You are one of the higher apes.
people on the internet saying things that are troubling, people
you are one
without
of the
any
higher
position of
apes.
authority, and authority figures saying those same things.
Considering you
Because
open
when
a
an
banana
authority
from the bottom
figure
like a fucking
says that,
heathen.
somebody who
I
has
do
actual
not.
power, it presents a different
You open it from the top,
opportunity
sometimes it doesn't open
to
because it's too green, it
somebody who
mushes the
chooses to
top.
be violent, that they're no longer criminals.
How come
they
none
are
of us
part
have
of
that
a
problem
government
besides you?
faction that is
'Cause I got weak
encouraging them
little
to
wimpy
commit this
freaking
violence. So
arms.
the
'Cause you're a
calculus they have
freaking
to
orangutan.
make is much easier to
Surprised you
make,
don't
which is
bite
why
it in
I think
half.
that they could amass such a large amount
Be
of
a
people that
termite
they could
mound, just-
actually overwhelm the Capitol Police and
I'm
assault
sorry, that's chimpanzees.
our democracy.
Well,
So I
orangutans
think
might do
those
that too.
having authority figures repeat these racist conspiracy theories is what's different now than from when I was working these cases.
So let's go back to before authority figures start repeating these theories, and let's go back to
theories.
Their propagation. I believe Dr. Pape suggested that their history shows that before you get to violence against a population, very often there's a deliberate campaign of propaganda targeting that same population with the purpose often of fomenting that violence. You've said that there are indications that propagation of great replacement theory is deliberate. If there are indications that great replacement propaganda is deliberate, are there indications not just of what authority figures might be spouting it, but about who is creating it and pushing it out into the internet and into society?
Again, the great replacement theory isn't something new, right? The European colonization of the quote-unquote New World was a white supremacist program. The white supremacy was part of our founding and part of our history. So these ideas have always been there. I mean, one of the things...
Yeah, but it seems that they have a lot more currency right now, and it looks like there's been a lot of talk about how much this is spread on Fox News, for instance. Do you think that Fox News is creating this as original content within Fox News? Or do you think there are entities or an enterprise of some kind that is creating the content to be fed to Fox News? Dr. Pape.
So once we have these ideas in the mainstream, sir, the mechanism of their propagation is not a little secret cell somewhere or...
All right, so before we bounce to 280U, let me kill this.
Thank you for
Let's add to the screen share. And
Thank you for what?
for taking care of the horse.
Oh.
All right, Tortan. You guys should be able to hear this. Let me know whether you can hear this, because we're going to end the stream with this, just to let everybody or remind everybody what's going on.
You have nothing in this house.
What?
Your son. Yours.
What about my son?
He stole my drink.
Okay.
He stole my Fanta. That one's yours. That one's not mine.
Now, this was today, guys, so listen to what he's saying today.
Congressman Johnson and Congressman Jones and Senator Martin and I introduced legislation to unpack the Supreme Court by increasing the number of justices by 4.
So yeah, he wants to unpack the Supreme Court by adding 4 more justices to the Supreme Court.
How is that unpacking if you're adding more?
Yeah, my wife's going, how's that unpacking? Well, according to Democrats, that is unpacking. So, all right, guys, I am going to bounce. I'm going to chill out for just a minute before we hit 2A streams. So you guys take them easy, and I'm pretty sure I will see you guys on 2ADU stream here in just a couple minutes. And then, of course, from there, as soon as Tactical Pineapple starts up, I am bouncing to Tactical Pineapple stream. So, typical.
Bot.
Let me remove that. So, typical Friday night. So, you perps all be cool, and I will catch you guys here in a little while. Y'all take them easy. Yeah, later, guys. Bye.